Hello everyone and welcome to the 5-minute German A2 exam preparation series. In today's video, we will take a look at the Sprechen part of the A2 exam. So we will take a look at what are the different questions that come in the Sprechen part and how you can answer them. I will also give you a lot of tips and sentences which you can use in different parts of the Sprechen exam. So let's not waste any time and let's get started. So as you know, the Goethe A2 exam has 4 parts. These are Hören, which is listening, Lesen, which is reading, Schreiben, which is writing, and Sprechen, which is speaking. And you will do the Sprechen part together with a partner. Now if you want to pass the Goethe A2 exam, you need at least 60 marks to pass. However, an important point over here is that out of these 60 marks, you need at least 15 marks in the Sprechen part, and in the Hören, Lesen and Schreiben parts, you need a total of 45 marks. So suppose that you have given the exam and you receive your result, in which you get 20 marks in Hören, 20 marks in Lesen and 20 marks in Schreiben. So this is a total of 60 marks, but you only get 10 marks in Sprechen. So when we add 60 and 10 together, the total is 70 marks. Now you have achieved more than 60 marks. However, you will not pass the exam. This is because in the Sprechen part, you need at least 15 marks. So this is why the Sprechen part is very important, and you have to make sure that you get at least 15 marks in this part so that you can pass the exam. So now let's take a look at the Sprechen part. So the Sprechen part of the exam has 3 further parts. In the first part, you have to ask your partner questions and also give answers. And these questions will be related to the introduction. So both you and your partner will get 4 cards with keywords, and you will have to ask him 4 questions, and then he will also ask you 4 questions, and you will have to give 4 answers. In the second part, you have to tell about your life or yourself, and for this you will get a question with keywords, and using these keywords you will have to make sentences. Then in the third part, you will have to plan something with your partner, and over here, both of you will get different options or schedules, and on this basis, you will have to complete your task. So now, let's start with the first part in which you have to ask your partner questions and also give answers. So suppose that this is you on the left side and your partner is on the right side. And in the exam, you will also have 2 examiners, and at the start, they will introduce themselves. And you will also have to give a short introduction. So this will just be a basic introduction. So in this you can tell your Name, where you are from, how old you are, and so on. So it does not have to be very detailed. After that, the examiner will give you 4 different cards which will have different keywords written on it. For example, Geburtstag, Wohnort, Beruf, and Hobby. And he or she will also give your partner 4 cards, which will have some other keywords written on them. For example, as you see over here, Studium or Ausbildung, Eltern, Nachname, and Fußball. And you have to ask questions related to the keywords that you have received. So let's see how this looks like in the exam. So we start with the first keyword, which is Geburtstag. So you can ask the question, Wann hast du Geburtstag? When is your birthday? Now you can also make this question with Sie, but it is preferred that you make them with Du. So that's why I will show you examples with Du. But if you find it difficult to make these questions with Du in the exam, then you can also use Sie. And your partner can answer it by saying, Mein Geburtstag ist am 20. August. My birthday is on 20th of August. Now over here, there is an important point, and that is that you have to also give some extra information when answering. Because if you give some extra information, then you will get better marks. So your partner can say, Dieses Jahr wurde ich 20 Jahre alt. This year I will be 20 years old. Now this is some extra information which he has given. And with this, the examiner knows that he can communicate a little bit in German, and there is a high chance that he will then get better marks. And you should also do the same when your partner asks you questions. Now after your partner has given the answer, you should also react to the answer. So you can say, Oh, das ist toll. Oh, that is great. Now the next keyword that we have is Wohnort, which is the place of residence. So you can ask the question, Und wo wohnst du? And where do you live? So your partner can answer it by saying, Ich wohne in Frankfurt, zusammen mit meiner Familie. I live in Frankfurt, together with my family. And to this, you can react by saying, Ich war schon mal in Frankfurt. I was already in Frankfurt und finde sie sehr schön and find it very beautiful. So when you react in this way, it shows that you can hold a conversation in German, because this is important for the A2 level. Now we move on to the next keyword, which is Beruf. So for this, you can ask the question, Und arbeitest du auch in Frankfurt? And do you also work in Frankfurt? Now this is a direct question. Another way to ask this is, Kannst du mir bitte sagen, was du beruflich machst? Can you please tell me what is your profession? Now this is an indirect question, which we have already learned in A2. So when you ask indirect questions, then it also shows that you know the different A2 grammar concepts. So let's take the indirect question, and in this case, remember that the verb goes to the end, as you see over here. So your partner can answer by saying, Ich arbeite als Softwareentwickler in Frankfurt. I work as a software developer in Frankfurt. And you can react to it by saying, Aha, und macht die Arbeit dir Spaß? And do you like the work? And then your partner can answer by saying, Ja, es macht mir viel Spaß. Yes, I like it very much. Then you can move on to the next question, which is hobby. So you can ask, Was sind deine Hobbys? What are your hobbies? And your partner can answer by saying, Meine Hobbys sind Bücher lesen und Filme sehen, besonders am Wochenende. My hobbies are to read books and to watch films, especially on the weekend. So you see, he has also told you when he likes to read books and watch films. And you can react to it by saying, das klingt interessant. Now, based on the information which your partner has given you, you can continue the conversation by asking a follow-up question. So you can ask, Was ist dein Lieblingsbuch? What is your favorite book? And your partner can answer this by saying, Mein Lieblingsbuch ist Harry Potter. My favorite book is Harry Potter. And to this you can say, Ja, das finde ich auch gut. Yes, I also find it good. So in this way, you can ask questions and also give answers in part 1. And as I mentioned earlier, always give extra information in the answer. And this extra information could be a reason why you do something, your opinion or feeling, you like it, you don't like it, or you can also say where you do an activity or with whom or how often. And if you are the one who is asking a question, then you should give a reaction to the answer. And you can do this by saying sehr schön or toll, or also by asking a follow-up question. And once you are done with your questions, then your partner will take a look at his or her cards, and then they will ask you 4 questions, and then you will also have to give answers. So we will not take a look at the other 4 cards in this video because otherwise it will become very long. So for this, I have created a list of introduction keywords and questions along with their answers, and I have linked it in the description below. You can go and take a look at it, and it will help you prepare for the different type of keywords that can come in the exam related to introduction. Now let me give you some helpful tips for Teil 1. So the first tip is that you should know the Wehrfragen. And there are 8 common Wehrfragen, which are was, which means what, wo, which means where, woher, which means from where, wohin, which means where to, wie, which means how, and some other variations of wie are wie viel, wie oft, wie viele. Then we have wer, which means who, wann, which means when, welch, which means which, and this can be welcher, welche, or welches, depending on the gender of the noun which comes after it. So these are the same Wehrfragen which you have already learned in A1. So if you just know these, then you can make a lot of different questions with these Wehrfragen. Then the next tip is that you should use indirect questions. This is because indirect questions are an A2 concept, and when you use these, then the examiner knows that you have learned the A2 concepts and can also use them in speaking. And you can make these indirect questions with ob, which means whether or if, and also with Wehrfragen. Some common indirect questions which you can use in the exam are Darf ich fragen? And then you ask the question. This means may I ask? And the follow-up question can be ob du in Frankfurt wohnst, whether you live in Frankfurt. Another question can be Ich möchte fragen, I would like to ask, and then you ask the question. For example, wie viele Geschwister du hast? How many siblings do you have? Or you can also say, kannst du mir sagen? Can you tell me? And then ask the question. Was du studiert hast? What have you studied? And you see, in all of these indirect questions, the verb goes to the end. So just keep this in mind as well. Now let me give you some different questions which you can use for different situations. Now if the keyword that you get is a noun or thing, for example, Buch, Essen, Farbe or Sport, etc., and you are finding it difficult to make a question, then you can always use the Lieblingsfrage. So the Lieblingsfrage is that you can ask, was ist dein or deine Lieblingsthing? And you can replace thing with the keyword that you have. So for example, you can say, was ist dein Lieblingsbuch? Or was ist deine Lieblingsfarbe? And so on. So you can always ask this Lieblingsfrage if you are finding it difficult to make a question with the keyword that you have received. Now if you receive keywords such as Sport, Musik or Yoga which show an activity or sport, then you can always ask the question, Magst du gern? And then add the activity at the end. So you can say, Magst du gern Sport or Magst du gern Musik? Another way to ask the same question can be, Magst du, then you add the activity, and then you add the time. So you can say, Magst du Yoga? And the time can be Wochenende. So Magst du Yoga am Wochenende? So this is also possible. But an important point over here is that these questions can only be used with nouns. And you see that all of these keywords that you see on the screen are nouns because their first letter is capital. And that is an indication of a noun. Now you can also make W-Fragen with activities or sport. For example, you can say, Wo machst du Sport? Or wo machst du Musik? And so on. Another W-Frage can be, Wann machst du Sport? Or wann machst du Yoga? So these are also possible questions that you can make. Now if you receive a keyword which has Fußball, then in this case you will replace machen and you will use spielen. So you will say, Spielst du gern Fußball? Or spielst du Fußball am Wochenende? Or wo spielst du Fußball? Or wann spielst du Fußball? So you see that the rest remains the same. You only have to change the verb depending on what the keyword is. Now if you receive the keywords schwimmen or joggen, both of which are verbs because the first letter of both is small, then in this case you can ask the question in which you start with the activity, schwimmst du gern or schwimmst du gern am Wochenende? So you see in this case the activity will come at the start. Now if you receive keywords related to essen und trinken such as pizza, Kaffee or pommes, then you can ask the question, isst du gern? And then you add the food or thing. For example, isst du gern Pizza? And if it is a drink, then you can say, trinkst du gern Kaffee? Now if you receive a keyword related to time or for things which you have to do at a specific time, such as Samstag, Arbeitszeit or Frühstück, then you can ask the question, was machst du am, and then add the time. For example, was machst du am Samstag? Or you can say, von wann bis wann arbeitest du? And for Frühstück, you can ask the question, wann machst du Frühstück am Wochenende, for example. Now if you receive a keyword related to a person, for example, Mutter, Freunde, Kollegen, then you can use the questions, wie heißt dein Vater, if it is a male, or deine Mutter, if it is a female. You can also ask, wie alt ist dein Vater or deine Mutter? And if it is a plural, then you can ask the question, wie heißen deine Freunde in der Schule, for example, or wie heißen deine Kollegen im Büro. So you can use these questions for people. Now if you receive keywords related to a place, for example, Schule or Arbeitsplatz, then you can simply ask the question, wo ist dein or deine, and then whatever place you have on the keyword. For example, wo ist deine Schule or wo ist dein Arbeitsplatz. So these are different questions that you can use in the exam for different keywords. So this was part 1 of the Sprechen exam. Now let's take a look at part 2, in which you have to tell about your life or yourself. And this part is done separately. So in this part, you will receive a card with a question on it. For example, you receive the card with the question, was machen Sie mit Ihren Freunden? What do you do with your friends? You will also have different keywords such as Kino, Essen, Sport and Ausflug. And you have to make sentences using these keywords. So let's make some sentences for this question, and I will rearrange it a little bit. so that I can show it to you on the screen. Now you also have to add a starting and an ending as well. So you can start to answer this question by saying, Mit meinen Freunden mache ich viele Dinge. With my friends, I do a lot of things. So Dinge is things. So for Kino, I can say, Wir gehen oft ins Kino. Meistens am Wochenende, einen neuen Film zu sehen. We often go in the cinema, mostly on the weekend, in order to watch a new film. For Ausflug, I can say, Einmal pro Monat machen wir einen Ausflug. Once a month, we do a trip. Zum Beispiel fahren wir in die Berge oder in eine andere Stadt. For example, we go to the mountains or in another city. For Essen, I can say, Wir essen gern zusammen und gehen oft in ein Restaurant. We happily eat together and often go in a restaurant. And for Sport, I can say, Dienstags und Donnerstags machen wir Sport. Tuesdays and Thursdays we do sport und spielen Fußball zusammen and play football together. So now I have covered all the 4 keywords, so I can end by saying, So verbringe ich Zeit mit meinen Freunden. In this way I spend time with my friends und es macht mir Freude and it makes me happy. Now once you are done with your answer, then the examiner will also ask you some questions. And these are mostly from the answer which you have given. So as you said in your answer that you often go in a restaurant, so the examiner can ask, Was bestellen Sie im Restaurant? What do you order at the restaurant? And you can answer this by saying, Ich bestelle meistens Burger mit Pommes, weil mir das gut schmeckt. I mostly order burger with fries because it tastes good. Then the examiner can also ask, Und wo spielen Sie Fußball? And where do you play football? And you can answer this by saying, Wir spielen Fußball im Park bei meinem Haus. We play football in the park by my house or near to my house. And you can extend your answer by saying, Wir spielen oft am Abend, aber auch morgens am Wochenende. We often play in the evening, but also in the morning on the weekend. So you can give more detail so that the examiner knows that you are able to communicate and give detailed answers in German. And sometimes it is possible that the examiner asks you some other question, for example, Warum lernen Sie Deutsch? Why are you learning German? And you can answer this by saying, Ich lerne Deutsch, weil ich in Deutschland studieren will. I am learning German because I want to study in Germany. So you see, over here we have used while, which is an A2 concept, so that the examiner knows that you know about the Nebensatz connectors and are able to use them in sentences. Now let's take a look at different helpful tips for Teil 2. So some different questions which can come in Teil 2 are, Was machen Sie mit Ihren Freunden? Or was machen Sie mit Ihrem Geld? So machen Sie is usually present in the question. So a possible starting that you can use for your answer can be mit, then the person or thing, mache ich viele Dinge. So you can say, mit meinen Freunden mache ich viele Dinge. Now if instead of Freunden in the question it is written Familie, then you can say, mit meiner Familie mache ich viele Dinge. And if it is a thing, for example Geld, then you can say, mit meinem Geld mache ich viele Dinge. So you see that this starting sentence can be used with different questions. Now what if you get the question, Was machen Sie am Wochenende? Then in this case, you will change this sentence a little bit and you will say, and then the time, mache ich viele Dinge. So if it is Wochenende, then you will say, Am Wochenende mache ich viele Dinge. If it is a specific day, for example Samstag, then you will say, Am Samstag mache ich viele Dinge. So in this way, you get a good start for your answer. Now if you want to extend your sentence, then there are different ways that you can do this. So you can do this by adding the time in your sentence. So you can say, Am Wochenende mache ich Sport. Einmal pro Monat mache ich Sport. Or ich mache Sport immer wenn ich Zeit habe. Another way to extend the sentence is by giving a reason. So you can say, Ich mache Sport, weil es mir Spaß macht. Or you can say, weil ich gern, and then the activity followed by the verb. So an example can be, Am Wochenende gehe ich ins Kino, weil ich gern Filme sehe. on the weekend I go to the cinema because I like to watch films. And if not specified in the question, you can also tell with who you go to do a specific activity. So you can add mit meiner Familie, mit meinen Freunden, and so on. Now let me give you some sample sentences which you can use in different situations. So for people or time, you can use a sentence Ich treffe mit and then the person, and then the time. So you can say Ich treffe mit meiner Familie am Wochenende. Now if you get a keyword with a place, then you can say Ich gehe then the time, for example Wochenende, in or ins, then the place, for example restaurant, mit, and then the person, for example mit meinen Freunden. If the keyword is related to food, then you can simply say Ich esse or trinke gern and then the food. And then you can also give a reason after it. For things, you can say Ich kaufe, then the thing, or you can say Ich spare Geld für, then the thing, for example Ich spare Geld für Urlaub. Or a more advanced sentence can be Ich spare Geld ein Auto zu kaufen, for example. So you can use these sentences for different keywords. Now for the ending, you can always use a sentence So verbringe ich Zeit mit, then the person, for example mit meiner Familie. Or if they have given you a time in the question, then you can use and then the time, for example am Wochenende. If they have given you a thing in the question, then you can use the ending Das ist was ich mit the thing mache. So for example, Das ist was ich mit meinem Geld mache. So you can simply replace the thing with whatever they have given you in the question. So this was part number 2 of Sprechen. Now let's take a look at the last part in which you have to plan something with your partner. And there are mostly 2 possible type of questions that you get in this part. One is with a schedule, so you get a calendar, and one is without a schedule. So you don't get a schedule, but you get some different options. So we will take a look at both of them one by one. So let's take a look at a question with schedule first. So suppose that you get the question, Ihr Freund hat eine Prüfung und möchte zusammen lernen. Your friend has an exam and he would like to learn together. Finden Sie einen Termin. Find a time where you can learn together. So you will get a schedule from the examiner which will look something like this, and your partner will also get a schedule which will be different from your schedule. Now based on these schedules which you receive, you will have to discuss with one another and find a time where you can learn together. So let's see how we can find a time to learn together. So to make the dialogue a little easier, I will give names to the people that we have over here. So the person on the left, I will name him John, and the person on the right, I will name him David. Now it is up to the examiner who they ask to start the conversation. So in this case, I will start with John. So John says, Hi David, sollen wir am Samstag zusammen für die Prüfung lernen? Hi David, should we learn together on Saturday for the exam? Then David replies by saying, Ja, das können wir gerne machen. Yes, we can do that. Then he asks, Wann hast du Zeit? When do you have time? Now John takes a look at his schedule and he sees that at 10 o'clock he has Frühstück. So he answers by saying, Ich frühstücke 10 Uhr. Vielleicht können wir 11 Uhr lernen. I have breakfast at 10 o'clock. Maybe we can learn at 11 o'clock. Because at 11 o'clock he is free. So then David will take a look at his schedule and he sees that from 11 till 12 he has brunch with Thomas. So he can reply to John by saying, Leider geht 11 Uhr bei mir nicht. Unfortunately, 11 o'clock is not possible for me. Ich habe von 11 bis 12 brunch mit Thomas. I have brunch with Thomas from 11 till 12. Now you can answer this in 2 separate sentences, or you can use a connector. So you can say, Leider geht 11 Uhr bei mir nicht, weil ich von 11 bis 12 brunch mit Thomas habe. Unfortunately, 11 o'clock is not possible for me because I have brunch with Thomas from 11 till 12. Then either David can propose something or John can take a look at his schedule and he sees that at 12 o'clock he has Einkaufen, which is grocery shopping. So he says, Oh, okay, 12 Uhr muss ich auch einkaufen. At 12 o'clock I must also go grocery shopping. Then he asks, Wie sieht es 13 Uhr aus? How does it look like at 13 o'clock? Then David takes a look at his schedule and he sees that at 13 o'clock he has a friseur or a barber appointment. So he says, Nein, da habe ich einen Friseurtermin. No, at that time I have a barber's appointment. So da means there, and over here it means at that time. Then David continues the conversation. Now he gives a suggestion. So he says, Aber 14 Uhr habe ich frei. But at 14 o'clock I am free. Sollen wir uns 14 Uhr treffen? Should we meet at 14 o'clock? Now John again takes a look at his schedule and he sees that at 14 o'clock he has swimming. So he says, Leider, da habe ich nicht frei. Unfortunately, at that time I am not free. And then he gives a reason. Ich gehe 14 Uhr schwimmen für eine Stunde. I will go for swimming at 14 o'clock for 1 hour. And then he says, Aber danach habe ich von 15 bis 17 Uhr Zeit. But after that, I have time from 15 till 17 o'clock. And you see on the schedule, there is no appointment from 15 till 17 o'clock. Then David also takes a look at his schedule and he sees that from 15 till 17 o'clock, he also does not have any appointment. So he says, Super, da habe ich auch keinen Termin. Super, at that time I also don't have any appointment. Dann lernen wir 15 Uhr. Then we will learn at 15 o'clock. And John can answer this by saying, Ja, das passt gut. Yes, that suits very good, or that is fine for me. Then David can say, Perfekt, bis dann. Perfect till then. So in this way, you can do a dialogue when you receive a schedule. And it is important that you do a little bit of discussion. And it should not be like in the first suggestion you say, okay, from 15 till 1700 o'clock, we can learn. And then the other person also says, yes, that is fine for me. And then you just end the dialogue. The purpose over here is that you do a little bit of communication and give suggestions and alternatives. So that's why even if your partner says it is okay after the first or second sentence, you should try to continue the conversation so that the examiner sees that you are able to do a dialogue in German and gives you good marks. So now let's take a look at the second type of question which can come in which you don't get any schedule. So suppose you get the question, Sie möchten mit Ihrem Partner am Samstag etwas unternehmen. You would like to do something with your partner on Saturday. So unternehmen means to do something. Besprechen Sie, was Sie machen möchten. Discuss what would you like to do. Now in this case, you will get a card with a main keyword at the center, for example Samstag, and you will have some other related keywords such as Museum, Kino, Zoo, Kochen, etc. Similarly, your partner will also get a card with the same keyword at the center. However, the other keywords will be different. For example, Berlin, Schwimmbad, Essen, Fußball, and so on, as you see over here. Now you have to use these keywords and plan something for Samstag. So let's see how we can plan something for Samstag using the keywords that we have over here. So again, I am going to start with John. So John says, Hey David, ich denke, dass wir am Samstag etwas zusammen machen sollen. Hey David, I think that we should do something together on Saturday. Then he says, Hast du eine Idee? Do you have an idea? So then David says, Ja, vielleicht können wir nach Berlin fahren und die Stadt besichtigen. Yes, maybe we can drive to Berlin and visit the city. So he has used Berlin in his answer over here. Then John can reply by saying, Berlin ist schön, aber es ist zu weit weg. Berlin is beautiful, but it is too far away. Then he gives his own suggestion. So he says, Wir können hier ein Museum besuchen. We can visit a museum over here. And then he follows it up by saying, Was sagst du? What do you say? Then David replies by saying, Museum finde ich nicht so interessant. I don't find museums interesting. Then he continues by saying, Ich gehe lieber ins Schwimmbad. I would prefer to go to a swimming pool. So now he has also used Schwimmbad in his answer. Then John says, Am Samstag wäre es zu kalt für das Schwimmbad. On Saturday it will be too cold for the swimming pool. Wir können aber in den Zoo gehen. We can go to the zoo. Then David replies by saying, Oder wir können auch Fußball spielen. or we can play football. Was meinst du? What is your opinion? So he has also asked the opinion of John. So John says, Fußball ist nicht so mein Hobby. Football is not my hobby. Vielleicht können wir ins Kino gehen. Maybe we can go to the cinema. Da läuft ein neuer Film. There is a new film playing over there. So he has used Kino now. Now since there has already been a little bit of conversation, so David can then say, Kino ist eine gute Idee. Das können wir machen. Cinema is a good idea. We can do that. Then he says, Was ist mit dem Essen? What is the plan for food? And then he makes another question. Sollen wir in einem Restaurant gehen? Should we go to a restaurant? Now this was not part of the keywords which David received, but you can make an extra question which is not on the card, then it is a good impression and it is possible that you get better marks. So I would recommend you to do it if possible. So then John says, Nach dem Film wäre es zu spät. After the film, it would be too late. Ich schlage vor, I propose or I suggest, dass wir zusammen bei mir etwas kochen. That we cook something together at my place. Then David says, Ja, das finde ich gut. So he agrees with John. So John says, Perfekt, so machen wir es. Perfect, we will do it like this. And in this way, you can also plan something if you get a question where you don't have any schedule. So try to make sentences with all the keywords that you receive and try to give suggestions and alternatives so that you get good marks. So now before we end part number 3, let me give you some helpful tips for this part. And the first tip is for starting the conversation. So if the examiner tells you that you have to start the conversation or dialogue, then you can use the words from the question. So you will have the card in front of you and you can do this by saying Hi and then the name of the other person, sollen wir, and then simply describe the task which is written on the card. For example, sollen wir am Samstag zusammen lernen? Now if the task is mandatory, then you can also use the starting Hi and then the name, and then you say wir sollen or müssen, and then you describe the task. For example, wir sollen or müssen ein Geschenk für Thomas kaufen. So depending on the task, you can use any of these startings, and as I said, simply use the words from the question so that you don't get stuck at the start. Now if you want to give a suggestion, then there are different ways to do this. Now if you have a schedule, then you can use the question sollen wir uns then you give the time treffen. Should we meet at this time? You can also say wir können uns then the time treffen. We can meet at this time. Another way to say this can be Hast du for example, 14 Uhr Zeit? Do you have time at 14 o'clock? You can also say Wie wäre es 14 Uhr? For example, how is it at 14 o'clock? Or you can say Wie sieht es then the time aus? Now if you don't get a schedule, then the sentences would be a little different. So you can say sollen wir and then the keyword followed by the verb. So for example, sollen wir ins Kino gehen? Or you can say Wir können, then the keyword followed by the verb. Wir können Fußball spielen, for example. So these are different sentences that you can use for giving a suggestion. So my recommendation would be that you try to use a different sentence each time you give a suggestion, so that the examiner sees that you know different sentences and you are not just repeating the same sentence again and again. Now if you want to ask the other person's opinion, then you can do this by saying Was meinst du, which means what is your opinion? Was denkst du, what do you think? Was sagst du, which means what do you say? So you can use these sentences after you give a suggestion. Now if you want to reject the proposal of the other person, then you can do it in different ways. Now if you have a schedule, then you can say Das geht leider nicht. That is not possible. Weil, and then you can give the reason. For example, weil ich einen Friseurtermin habe. Another way can be Nein, then the time, habe ich, and then you give the reason. Nein, 14 Uhr habe ich Mittagsessen. You can also say then the time, kann ich nicht. At this time I cannot. Da habe ich, and then you give the reason. And one more way can be Das ist schwierig, weil time, ich, and then you give the reason. That is difficult because at time I have this commitment, for example. Now in case you don't have a schedule, Then you can give an alternative or reject a suggestion by saying vielleicht können wir, and then you use a keyword that you have. Another way can be das finde ich nicht so interessant, weil, and then you give a reason. For example, weil Fußball nicht mein Hobby ist. So these are different ways that you can give an alternative or reject the proposal from the other person. Now if you have discussed the different options and you want to accept, then you can do this by saying das passt für mich. That suits me. Or you can say ja, das passt. Yes, that's fine. Another way can be ja, gute Idee. Yes, good idea. Or you can say ja, da habe ich auch Zeit. Or ja, 14 Uhr habe ich auch Zeit. So in this way you can accept the proposal from the other person and bring the dialogue to an end. And for the ending, you can say perfekt, bis dann, or perfekt, so machen wir es. And with this, you can then end the dialogue. So these were different sentences that you can use for part 3 of Sprechen. And with this, we have covered all the different parts of the Sprechen exam. Now before I end the lesson, let me give you some final tips for the exam. So in the exam, try to remain calm and speak with confidence. And don't worry about small mistakes. For example, if you use the wrong article or maybe the position of the verb is not correct, don't worry about that. Important is that you speak with confidence and try to speak without interruption. And if you don't understand something which your partner or the examiner says, then you can simply say wie bitte or kannst du bitte das wiederholen. If it is the examiner, then you will say können Sie das bitte wiederholen? Or you can simply say ich habe dich or ich habe Sie nicht verstanden. And then your partner or the examiner will repeat whatever they said. So prepare as much as you can and try to do your best in the exam. And I am sure that if you follow these tips and do some practice of the Sprechen part, you will be able to pass it and get very good marks. So I hope that this video was helpful for you. If you have an exam coming up, I wish you all the best. Please let me know in the comments if you found this video and the tips helpful. Thank you very much for your time, and we will see each other in the next video.